A move was perhaps inevitable at some point, but right now it qualifies as surprising. Brian Hartline expected to leave Ohio State to take over as a head coach at South Florida. It is the start of the national signing period. Ohio State is getting ready for the college football playoff or a Big Ten championship first before they get to that point on Saturday. And Brian Hartline expected to be a critical part of that. And so we have some snap judgments that we weren't really anticipating on this Wednesday in Columbus. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. And I am not surprised that Brian Hartline, even by South Florida, the timing is a little bit unorthodox, or at least not ideal for Ohio State's perspective. I thought at some point he would want to be a head coach. I thought it might not be this offseason, Burn.
Yeah, but when the opportunity happens, the opportunity happens. There's a ton of things going on in the world of college football and the coaching carousel, and you don't know what's going to be open next year. As we started to think about all the possibilities for Brian Hartline a month or so when the Penn State job opened up and his name was being linked to that, and all the success that Alex Golesh has been having down in Tampa, South Florida, Kentucky, those are two of the ones that they came open I think people thought might be real. It's a good opportunity for him. You can't blame him for taking it. Obviously, as we record this, it's 10:13 on Wednesday morning. This news just broke about 10 minutes ago. And Ohio State's supposed to be finding out in about 20 minutes from now if Chris Henry Jr., the country's #1 ranked receiver in the class of 2026, is going to sign with Ohio State or Oregon, who just lost their offensive coordinator. So it's not ideal from that perspective for sure. Ohio State still does not have a signed document from Indiana receiver Jaquaden Guilford either, who also the Buckeyes are waiting on. They just lost a commitment to USC as Caden Dixon-Wyatt signed with the Trojans as we expected. But now a 5-man recruiting class at wide receiver has 2 guys signed and 2 very big unknowns, with Ohio State looking at a team that's not going to have its ace recruiter on its staff after this offseason or after this playoff run. So not ideal from a timing perspective at all. But again, as you said, somewhat inevitable.
Yeah, and I think if you look at this, and that is where Brian Hartline has made the most waves as an assistant coach and now as an offensive coordinator in this 1 year calling plays for Ohio State, has been the recruiting impact. And that's immediately where you go, because again, it is not Brian Hartline's fault that Alex Golesh left South Florida and they needed to put somebody in place for the signing period and to start working on the transfer portal and all that. The timing happened when it happened. But, in terms of inflicting the most pain on Ohio State specifically, if that's where his success lies, I think that there's a strong case to be made that Ohio State will be able to replace the play calling acumen, the game planning ability. It could get Chip Kelly right now if it needed to, and maybe not even miss a beat. And I don't say that to diminish what Brian Hartline's impact. I thought he called a masterpiece, maybe his best game of the year on Saturday to win the game in the Big House. But the trying to replace what he has given in recruiting and developing of the wide receivers is going to be the biggest challenge here, without question. And the fact that it is happening on the same day that you're expecting these signatures to roll in, and then you open up the discussion, immediately people's mind will go, well, it's South Florida. Are Brandon Ennis and Jeremiah Smith going to go with him? That would be absolutely shocking as a development to me, given everything that they have, their buy-in at Ohio State and the difference in NIL investment between Ohio State and USF. But I can't certainly guarantee any of that. And all of this is about to come to a head at a time when we just thought that maybe there'd be a sense of normalcy to this December for Ohio State, and that's now out the window.
Well, again, as anyone who would expect or be worried that Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis are going to head to play for the Bulls, I think that's probably unlikely. The question, of course, becomes, in this free agent era of college football, are there other teams that will see this as an opportunity or an opening for Ohio State and get very aggressive on those players? Ryan Day, I would assume, has been prepared for this eventuality at some juncture. Again, timing being what it is, it's not ideal, but Alex Golesh was only hired by Auburn 2 days ago, and so you didn't really know for sure what was going on. I imagine in the inner circles and the inner workings of the coaching world, there are conversations that lead to this possibility. We're going to find out real quick. I mean, ultimately, if Ohio State was prepared for this, if Ryan Day and the rest of the coaching staff have been picking up the slack in the Chris Henry Jr. discussion or not, because again, that is where this comes really down to today, the impact of this. Brian Hartline is not going to leave Ohio State before the playoff. Brian Hartline is not going to stop coaching at Ohio State over this next month, he's going to try to win a national championship. And I assume that South Florida wants him to do that because it would be good for them to have a national championship winning coach, a two-time national championship winning coach, and an offensive coordinator taking over. So it's not a concern from this next month for Ohio State. It's a concern for today, and it's a concern for the end of January when the transfer portal opens, hopefully for Ohio State after holding up that trophy again. So what you're looking at here is how do you replace Brian Hartline as a recruiter? And as you said, you really don't. Now, Ohio State clearly has developed and produced NFL wide receiver talent at a high level before Brian Hartline returned to Ohio State, but he had elevated it to a place that nobody could have imagined, and that's why he's getting this opportunity. Again, it's hard to begrudge him, but at the same time, the timing is not ideal in Columbus, and that's certainly the problem right now for Mark Pantoni and Ryan Day.
Yeah, you and I have had this conversation before. If you think about the history of Ohio State football, they didn't just suddenly start recruiting elite wide receivers or sending them to the NFL under Brian Hartline. As you said, it has become astronomical when you look at what happens with all. Again, just to reference what happened 5 days ago, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and Brandon Ennis all scored touchdowns to snap that losing streak against Michigan. We know how good all of those guys are. We know what recruiting stars were next to their names when they were coming out of high school. It has, without question, been a golden era of wide receiver recruiting, but there have been others before. You think about, those teams in the mid 2000s and the rush of NFL caliber receivers that went through there. The stretch under Zach Smith and Urban Meyer in that decade when I first started covering the team. Bunch of guys still in the league and making a lot of money that came through the program at that time as well. So, I don't. This is not meant to sound as like, well, Brian Hartline's gone. Forget about the contributions he made. I fully appreciate and I recognize that it's going to be difficult to replace that. But I don't think Ohio State fans should view this as impossible or, kick Brian Hartline's butt on the way out the door. He's an alma mater here. This is his alma mater. He's a legend, and maybe there will be an opportunity for him to come back one day because he maybe needs a head coaching job like this to cut his teeth and set himself up for something bigger down the road. I don't know. This is not a burn the bridge situation and say that the timing was horrible and Brian Hartline did damage. He did way more to elevate his alma mater than he did to hurt it with one day of setback.
Yeah, he's been a part of this Ohio State program for the last 8 years, every step along the way with Ryan Day, and those two I think will depart amicably. And you hope, as you said, maybe this is an opportunity for Brian to do what he needs to do to eventually be back here and be the head coach, and it gives him a little bit of a leg up for that possibility and that potential back, in 2030 or 2032, whenever Ryan Day's contract up is if he retires or whatever. But the question people are going to ask is who do they hire? And again, as we record this, it's been 15 minutes since this news broke. It is way too early to assume that. What is not too early to assume is that Ryan Day is going to nail a hire because that's what he's been doing regularly since he took over at Ohio State, especially his last 5 or 6 run-throughs. So I imagine he already got a short list and has had conversations with people because, again, nothing happens by surprise really inside of the building. But on the outside, when you just think that Ohio State, hey, you got over the hump and Kentucky hires Will Stein right away, and then now you don't have to worry about it. And this is not something that was even being lobbed about. There were no coaching plane trackers or anything like that from South Florida to Columbus. So that one feels like it's out of the blue, but it does make a lot of sense for Brian Hartline, and it makes a lot of sense for his career and for South Florida to go get a guy like him. So obviously there's going to be conversation around whether or not maybe Keenan Bailey gets promoted to that spot at Ohio State. He has great relationships in South Florida. That's where he's from. He's been with Brian Hartline every step of the way and Ryan Day. And so as he continues his ascension up the coaching ranks, maybe that's a spot where you see him evolve. Maybe they go outside and bring someone else in. Who knows? Santonio Holmes is a head coach somewhere right now in a lower level of football. There's guys out there that have ties to the program, but Ryan Day has proven over and over again that he's not interested in necessarily ties to the Ohio State program as much as he is interested in a fit that works and a staff that is fully aligned and a guy that understands his philosophy and buys into his program. And Brian Hartline has been a major part of building it, and he deserves a ton of credit and respect from Ohio State fans. But that's not going to make today any easier if Chris Henry Jr. decides to not sign or signs at USC or Oregon all of a sudden because of this news happening 25 minutes before he was expected to make an announcement.
Yeah, I mean, if these are snap judgments, then the first thing that comes to your mind is that Chip Kelly is available, and if you're looking for someone to come back and take over the play calling and put together the game planning during the week, Ryan Day has built-in trust with that. Now, it's well documented that you're gonna be losing significantly on the recruiting front with what Brian Hartline did in that exact same position, but as you mentioned, my mind immediately goes to further elevation and further responsibilities for Keenan Bailey. And maybe that means, Devin Jordan has also been in this program for several years and has become a key component. He's had to take on a more active role with the wide receivers this year as Brian Hartline has become the offensive coordinator. So, I know that that's not the sexy solution, and maybe it won't even be the ultimate solution. Trying to bring Chip Kelly back, it seemed like he definitely wanted to get out of college football around this time a year ago. So I'm not saying that's the only path forward. There's been other candidates that Ohio State and Ryan Day have talked to over the last couple of years. Jason Candle could be, maybe this is his opportunity to step in and do that. I don't know. If we're putting together initial candidates, and that's probably not even like Ryan Day's top priority at this very moment, if we're being honest,
Oh, I'm sure
because
he's on the phone with Chris Henry Jr. right now, so
well,
that's
no,
that's
I'm
that's got to
not.
be priority one.
I'm saying that getting through signing day, and as we saw with Matt Patricia and the Chip Kelly hire as well, like that may not be something that even gets on the front burner until mid-January, because you're gonna have Brian Hartline will not be abandoning the Buckeyes to go take over the Bulls on December 3rd. Like, that is not going to occur. They are going to get into Indianapolis on Saturday. They're going to go through the college football playoff, and then when we've seen this before with Tom Herman, we've seen it with Luke Fickell. You're going to have to multitask. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. But one thing we have always said about Brian Hartline is that as he has matured in this profession, uh, time management and confidence are not anything that is a short suit for him. I think he'll handle this well, and Ryan Day expects him to.
Yeah, and we'll see how Ohio State handles it. I think that there is a real possibility that this search for a receiver coach does extend a little bit into the offseason, but it's incumbent on Ryan Day to make sure recruits and the players in the building, especially the guys like Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis, for example, understand what this offense is going to be next year, what it's going to be with Julian Sayin at the helm and everyone on the offense minus Carnell Tate and maybe Max Clare or Tegra Shabola returning. It's got an opportunity to be truly special. It's one more year of college football for Brandon Ennis and Jeremiah Smith. That's obviously where people are going to be focused and concerned. But this is a search that requires multiple levels. It's a multifaceted because you're looking for an offensive coordinator. You're also looking for an elite recruiter to take over and take over the wide receivers. So this is three jobs in one, really, that Brian Hartline is going to require Ohio State to replace. And that's when things get really kind of difficult to really see the path for Ohio State, because it doesn't seem like anyone is going to be able to walk in and fill all three of those roles at the same time the way that Hartline has. So it's going to be an adjustment. It's going to be a challenging few weeks for Ohio State. But really for Ryan Day, who's going to be at the podium at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center in an hour and a half, this changes the tenor of these next couple hours in a major, major way. And obviously we're going to do everything we can to get as much information as we can when we get into the building.
We will be there shortly. We said it was going to be a busy Woody Wednesday, and it has certainly exceeded expectations already. We're not even there yet, but we'll have some more snap judgments, I'm sure, later on, because there will be Buckeyes talking after practice on Wednesday night. Ryan Day is going to be talking twice today, so no changes to that plan as of this moment. But stick with us at 97.1 The Fan on YouTube or 10 TV Plus, or Apple, Spotify, Roku, anywhere you get those podcasts, as we get the latest on what's going on with Brian Hartline, expected to depart Ohio State to take over at USF, and so much more at the start of the national signing period and a Big Ten championship game on Saturday night. He's Berm. I'm Austin. These have been Snap Judgments. We'll talk to you later.